Hello and welcome into another episode of Big Talk, college sports with a Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. I'm Dalton Shetler alongside my partner Sam Sprunger. Sam, how are we feeling?
But before I was doing what people do when they're waiting for something to happen. Before we got on here, I was looking at Instagram and saw the snack words reel. Have you are you familiar with the snack words reels?
I'm too old.
They go to games and record. They put people up on the jumbotron or whatever, but they
Mhm.
show it backwards while they're eating their snack. They run it
Oh,
backwards,
yes,
so you
yes,
see the
yes,
snack
yes.
come out of their mouth.
I didn't know it was called snack words. That's
Yeah,
you know what?
snack words.
Hat tip to whoever did that. That's
Right.
that's good work. Good work by somebody out
But
there.
I enjoyed that before we went on today. So
Well, and Sam's feeling good because look, Sam, one of his favorite sports all time has always been baseball, and it is October,
yep,
and you know what that means.
I'm rooting for
That
one
means,
player.
well, is it does it involve what's happening tonight? Because at 11
Yes,
o'clock we kick off USC and Rutgers.
yes,
Are
that's
you
it.
Kyle
no,
Monangai or Miller Moss or
no, no. I'm rooting for one guy in the World Series, and Dalton, I'm sure you would know who it is, but it's Anthony Rizzo. I hope he gets another ring. That's the only
yeah.
thing. If he doesn't, I'm not going to cry or lose sleep over it, but I would be happy for him if he got another.
Yeah. No, and fair enough. I mean, that's said as a lifelong Cubs fan, but I can't help but kind of laugh and also revel and bask in what the greatness and draw of luck it was that you get the Dodgers and Yankees in the World Series, right? And game 1 is tonight.
Two largest markets in the country.
Well, in following it, Fox said with foresight months ago, what if we had Rutgers and USC kickoff that same night, involving the LA and New York City markets? And so that's what we have tonight. Rutgers and USC, 11 o'clock kick following game 1 of the World Series. So
Ugh.
Fox is going to do some numbers tonight.
Ugh.
11 is insane.
Oh, and who would have thought? And I know we'll talk about it a little bit more, but who would have thought there would be one? Well, probably a lot of people would have thought there was one team with a winning record in that game, but it wouldn't be Rutgers.
Right. It is something else. But yeah, no, so we get Big Ten football tonight, and I have the entire week spent time thinking about that. Like, look at what Fox created months ago with that foresight. That was
Well,
pretty
they
smart.
were doing it just for the fact that they wanted to be able to broadcast both, but it worked out brilliantly that both the LA and New York markets are involved with both.
And I think that was the play from the
The hope,
get-go, and
yeah,
yeah,
the
like,
hope.
these two teams are pretty good, and what if it happens? And now we're seeing what happens. It's gonna be interesting to look at the ratings after, tonight for both of those games. I'm actually kinda excited for that, but that's enough sports media talk, right? Because not
Yeah,
everybody cares about TV viewership and whatnot, but it is interesting. We
sure.
could actually talk about Rutgers USC, but let's go ahead and jump back to last week, Sam, because there were a couple of things, nothing bigger than what's happening in Bloomington. I mean, look, if you're not on the bandwagon of Kurt Signetti and what he's got going on, like it's one of the
You
best
missed it.
stories in sports. Yeah. And look, if you throw in the context of what this program is, it's the losingest football program in FBS. Like, there's nobody who loses more than Indiana all time. Right now, they're undefeated. They are rolling. College game day is coming to Bloomington. Like, what they've done in just year 1 of Kurt Signetti is simply unprecedented. It's
Mhm.
unbelievable. And they beat Nebraska 56-7, just beat the brakes off the Huskers. That was one that I just stared at in disbelief, Sam.
I made the mention last week that if IU won this game, I think you need to consider them seriously for the playoff in the
Mhm.
aspect of they're going to be playing well enough and their schedule plays out well enough that if they just do what they've been doing, they're going to probably end up in that top 12. It's just it's there are enough teams that are beating up each other above that, could the Big Ten get 3 in with IU being one of them? Sure, because I think that Penn State Ohio State game is going to play a lot to uh, that third team. And if IU
Mm-hmm.
beats Michigan or Ohio State or both, goodness gracious, if they beat both, watch out. But that they're a serious contender. Now the only thing that might come up and bite them is the fact that they lost Rourke.
Yep.
It's I haven't heard if it's a definite amount of time, but he's out indefinitely right now, and he is a
I
big
believe it's a
part.
shorter window, but he's certainly
Okay,
not playing this weekend.
correct. But it could, that could throw a little wrench into the spokes, just for the fact that he's one of the main reasons why that offense, not the only reason, but a good main reason as to why that offense runs the way it does. It's the number one scoring offense in college football.
It just, that sentence alone is just bewildering because, again, we give the context of what Indiana football's been. And also,
Right.
look, we're talking about football. We're talking about the same sport where we're throwing around billion-dollar TV contracts. There's money everywhere. I'm not a big PC gamer, so I don't know what games are equivalent to this, but the ones where you just stack up resources and you just kind of build empires, that's college football. You
Yeah.
have Ohio State, you have Bama, you have Georgia, you have LSU, you have all these massive programs that have all this money, all the resources, and everybody else is fighting kind of with an arm behind their back because they're at a disadvantage before you even get things going. And for Kurt Signetti to flip it all on its head and be 7-0 at this point in the season, I mean, he's Big Ten Coach of the Year, and this is one of the most remarkable stories, especially as things have gotten more and more lopsided with resources. It's one of the most remarkable stories, I think, in college football in the modern era.
I wouldn't disagree. And you're looking at now they're coming off a 56-7 win.
That's what's
over
crazy.
A good Nebraska team. Now, we didn't anticipate that happening. At the beginning of the year, we didn't even look at IU as being a threat to Nebraska's record.
Yep.
We didn't know about Illinois, but that happened. We thought, but at that point, IU was starting to play well. And then they get into this matchup, and IU blew the doors off of a good Nebraska team. I'm not saying they're great. They were my dark horse to make the playoff, but their schedule did play out well for them. We just didn't foresee IU doing what they're doing.
Well, and the thing is, heading into last weekend, you could have talked me either way. You could have talked me into a Nebraska win. You could have talked me into an Indiana win. What you could not have convinced me of was that Indiana would win by 49 points. Their quarterback would be hurt in the middle of the game, and their backup would come in and still be slinging it, and they'd be rolling the Huskers. Couldn't have convinced me of it.
They won by 7 touchdowns. Not 7 scores, 7 touchdowns.
It's the most mind-numbing thing going on in college football. It is just unreal.
And
unreal.
And you brought up, that IU is the losingest FBS program in the history of college football. That's not me piling onto it, but that is what lends to me that maybe this is a stepping point for Signetti. It's not necessarily his home. He may turn it into, but I'm not convinced that it is. I'm convinced that he went there to say, you know what, this is the program I can turn around and maybe catapult me further. He obviously has the ability to win wherever he goes. So in order for maybe he takes over a larger program, a more blue blood program that is struggling and wants to get back to its glory or whatever, why not take a flyer on that guy that all he does is win? Just Google him and go to Bloomington and dump a truckload of money. And honestly, if you have a higher blue blood program, unless he's really just set on IU being his forever home, that's going to pull him away. And it's not me knocking on IU, because honestly, as I get older, I still don't like IU, but I don't hate IU football because just what you said, they're the losingest program of FBS history. That's not, I don't hate them. I really don't like them though. So
yeah, no, fair enough. But It is the best story there is. And like you dropped the line that he used earlier this offseason, the I win, Google me. And
Yeah.
then we saw him at the Big Ten football media days where he got up there and said, look, I've been picked second to last twice. One time we were playing for the conference championship game, the other time we won the conference championship. And like as all of that was being said, I remember saying, hey, Kurt Cignetti's not scared. This is a really fun, like heel character in the WWE that has just like entered the ring of Big Ten football, and I'm here for it. I love it. I didn't see it actually panning out to 7-0.
No.
I thought he would have success. I didn't know what level that would look like, but I
Five and
certainly didn't
two, four
believe.
and three at this point.
Yeah, I didn't believe it'd be 7-0. And look, if you analyze Indiana's schedule, it hasn't necessarily been super strong by any means,
Right.
but the way they're winning is different. Where they're scoring 77 points against Western Illinois, where they roll Nebraska 56-7. It's different. And that
Mm-hmm.
alone is what's popping off the page and saying, oh, they are a contender for the playoff.
Well, in the way their schedule plays out for them, they could be playing for the conference championship.
Yeah.
They
Well,
really could be.
and so let's think about this. So this week they have Washington, right? College game day comes to town. If they survive that without their quarterback, which they're favored to do,
Right.
they'd be 8-0. Then they go to East Lansing. They play Michigan State. That's a winnable game.
They'll go
Then
in
they
favored
have.
in that game.
I think so too. I actually think it'll be closer to like right now they're favored by 6.5 with them at East Lansing. I think that's going to be a close number
I think so
when they
too.
get
Yeah.
here because we'll
Yep.
get to Michigan State in a minute too. But that was a big win over Iowa.
Yes, it
Um,
was.
but so after they make the trip to East Lansing, if they survive that, they're 9-0, and then they have Michigan, Ohio State, and Purdue. Look, based on what we've seen here recently, I think they'd be favored over Michigan,
I think so too.
and they're certainly going to be favored over Purdue. Like at that point, then you're just talking about maybe a loss to Ohio State. Like if they survive these following weeks, like they're in a position with 3 games to go where they got to beat Michigan, Purdue, and they still would either be in the conference championship game or they would be. They probably wouldn't be in the conference championship game then, though, because Oregon will probably be in there and Ohio State would have the head-to-head. But nonetheless, that's a real contender for the playoff. Like that is a playoff resume.
Oh, the reason why I say that they could end up there is Ohio State still has to play Penn State, and
Yeah.
that's a whatever history you have, with that, it's still in the realm of possibility that Penn State
Mm-hmm.
could beat Ohio State. Ohio State's shown that they're not unbeatable. I mean, but at the same point, they've shown that they're a really, really good football team too. So that game, while I think probably Ohio State beats Penn State down the road, I don't know that it's a foregone conclusion either.
No, I agree with you, and that's forgive me because I think you're right. I wasn't trying to rule them out. I
No,
just was
no,
putting the
I understand. I
probabilities
was just
with
confirming
hypothetical.
the
Yeah.
point, Dalton.
No, no, no. Well, that's I'm glad you did. I just making sure I
Right.
didn't come across as
Sure.
dismissive
Right.
because that was not the intention. But so Indiana rolls. Let's go ahead and jump over to, as we mentioned, Michigan State, who's the Hoosiers' next week opponent after this week. Michigan State off the bye week hosts Iowa, wins it 32-20. Michigan State in this game set a new school record, 6 field goals made by the kicker Jonathan Kim. Ended up being Big Ten Special Teams Player of the Week, but
Well, he had the lead at half. He scored all 12 points.
That's true. That's a good point. But if we dive into some of these numbers, look, for Michigan State, Aiden Giles had some really good balls in this game. He really had some nice passes in this one. Threw for 256 yards, had a touchdown. Receiving wise, Nick Marsh had 113 yards and 8 catches. That's the freshman that they're throwing to there. He's going to at this point demolish the Michigan State freshman single season receiving record, and he missed a game. So like he's this is something to get used to. Nick Marsh is a stud. Montori Foster gets 100 yards and a touchdown with 5 catches, but Michigan State ran the ball. 212 yards in this game. If you go back before the bye week when they played Oregon, they couldn't muster anything on the ground.
Yeah.
After the bye week, they make some adjustments. Jonathan Smith talked about it during the weekly press conference. They saw some things they wanted to shore up, some fundamentals they wanted to polish up, some things to tweak. and all of a sudden the running game explodes for 212 yards. And I felt that takes pressure off of Aiden Childs, your young quarterback, to make some plays, not being 3rd and 10, 3rd and 12 behind the sticks on the drives. And I thought that was the biggest turning point. I think if Michigan State, because look, Michigan State in history, they've been at their best when they can run the football. Pound green pound is what they say up here in mid-Michigan. Them getting to 212 yards was a big sign. And I think if they can do that this week as they go down the road to Michigan, which we can talk about here in a little bit, that just opens up so many more doors for Aiden Childs in this passing game, and helps the youngster to have some confidence and to really play at the best of his ability. But I thought Michigan State picking apart Iowa, because look, I mean, it's only a 12-point win, but if you finish a couple of those drives, and you can call shoulda, coulda, woulda if you want, but if they finish some of those drives with touchdowns, like, we're looking at a 3-score, 4-score win for Michigan State over Iowa.
Yeah, excuse me. The one thing that I saw the halftime interview, and Smith was saying, we've got to execute. That's going to be their one big downfall going forward this year. They have to put touchdowns on the board. Now,
yes,
it doesn't hurt that they were playing a pretty inept offense in Iowa. Not to say that they can't score points, but if they're going up against a decent defense, they don't produce a lot of points. And obviously, zeros for the first half. That helped the fact that Michigan State was only able to kick 4 field goals. They were up by 12 points at that point.
Yep.
But if they could have punched 2 of those into the end zone, this game would have been over at halftime. And I think Michigan State's they're still young. They're still working on getting their identity fully in place with Coach Smith at the helm. That it is definitely something that they've got to work on, making sure they get touchdowns rather than settling for field goals when they're inside the red zone.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think that's one of the biggest concerns you would point to right now with Michigan State.
And 6 field goals lends to that.
Correct. But I did want to bring this up since we talk about the 6 field goals and Jonathan Kim. Ben Stevens, who always has these nuggets that I really appreciate on Big Ten football. He does a great job in dropping in some nuggets I may not be aware of at the time. He had tweeted out, or X'd out. We're calling it tweeted. This
formerly known as tweeting.
Let's just make this a decision now between us. Tweeted. He tweeted, 19 FBS kickers have attempted 15 plus field goals this season. Okay. So of those 19, 5 kickers have made at least 85% of their field goal attempts. So in terms of volume and accuracy, we're down to 5 kickers in the country.
Right.
Now, of those 5, if we bump the percentage from 85 to 90%, we trimmed the list to 1. That 1 is Jonathan Kim. He's 15 of 16 now this season. The lone miss came in that game against Iowa. He missed a 55-yarder that had the leg, but just was a bit off. But it's unbelievable what they got there as a kicker.
Yeah, and you know what? That's a great thing to have as
but
a
you don't
backup.
want to rely on it.
You don't want to rely on it.
Absolutely
and you know, the defense, while they're not complaining that that the offense is getting points, they're like, "Come on, guys, you got to put it in the end zone." At some point we're gonna let some points up. It's inevitable that it's gonna happen, and it worked out that it was Iowa to where that offense isn't as productive. But when you have 8 scoring drives and only 2 of them are touchdowns, that's not gonna lend to a bunch of W's if you're playing somebody with a better offense.
Right. No, I completely agree. I think that's a big thing to look forward to.
But it is a very good thing to have in your back pocket, having that accurate of a kicker.
Absolutely. 100%. A couple other games I wanted to talk about. They celebrated 100 years in a day from when Red Grange, the Galloping Ghost, torched Michigan, had
Uniforms
4 touchdowns.
Were
they were so good.
And they were hand-painted, each one of them.
It was the sideline report where they went through the leather helmet design was really well done.
Mm-hmm.
But uh, of course, the story goes Red Grange Galloping Ghosts just destroyed Michigan on that day back in 1924. I think he touched the ball 5 times to start the game and scored on 4 of those 5 touches.
That's
Just a
pretty good
historic
percentage.
day. Yeah, pretty efficient. If you're gonna
He
be
had a
one thing
good
in life,
game
be
in
efficient.
a series, basically.
But so they celebrate that it was 100 years from then they rededicated Memorial Stadium, and Illinois celebrates it in style with a 21-7 win over Michigan. Look out, the Illini are for real right now, Sam.
Can I just say they dismantled Michigan?
Yeah, I think that's
because
fair.
because while it was close at the half, it was one score. You never really felt that Michigan was in it.
Yep.
Illinois kept them at an arm's length the whole time, and it just felt like Illinois was by and far the better team on the field, at least last Saturday. I don't
Yeah.
know that I would go as far as to say that they're an overall better team. They're performing better this year than what Michigan is at times that they need. I mean, it just
Mm-hmm.
it's we expected Michigan to have a drop off from what they were
Yes.
last year. I mean, we just did, and right now they're kind of holding serve to what I thought they would be. Michigan,
Mm-hmm.
not a bad team, but a team that needs to get its identity a little bit more.
Well, and I don't think any of us predicted that the quarterback play in week 7 or 8 would still be such a question mark,
Right.
where Sharon Moore is getting a question during the weekly press conference about who the starter is going to be. And he says they're not committed yet, or they're going to figure it out later in the week. To paraphrase, I can't remember the exact quote, but like we don't know who the starter is going to be when they take on their rival Michigan State. Um, I think a lot of people had hoped that when Jack Tuttle would come back and actually recover from the injury that he'd been dealing with for so long, that would fix some of the issues. Maybe it's their best option, but it still seems like they have some pretty glaring problems.
Well, and excuse me, to me it is never a good idea to have a quarterback controversy or decision to make when you're in the middle of a season.
Yeah.
That should be preseason stuff, and not to say that you don't make changes, but to literally say we're going to make that later down the way. You should know what you've got and make a decision so that quarterback can prepare the whole week as that starter. Because when you're in a competition, you tighten up a little bit. And
Yeah.
so maybe you're not getting your best practice in because you're worried about, well, I can't make a mistake because that may take me and make me the backup this week. And so it lends to when you don't know what's going on and whether you're not sure about what the decision is, you may not get the best performance.
Yeah. No, it's a fair point. And I mean, to your point, there's the logic and theory. Even if you have two good quarterbacks where you're having a hard time making a decision and you're playing both just because they've both earned it. Like there's always a concern with that aspect. When you're talking
Mm-hmm.
about playing 3 different quarterbacks because nobody's really separating themselves, like it's a whole nother ball of wax, an even bigger problem that Michigan currently has to deal with. But I do want to move to 2 other games before we get to this week, Sam.
Yeah,
One, Maryland beats USC 29-28. They have one of the best kneel down celebrations I've ever seen in my life,
I
where
missed it.
Billy Edwards, the quarterback, takes the knee down, throws up an alley oop to his running back, and then becomes a basketball hoop where he puts his arms in a circle and the running back dunks it in the middle of the hoop and they celebrate as the clock is winding out. Excellent celebration. No notes. Maryland wins 29-28. USC, I thought there was maybe some concerns about maybe them adapting to the Big Ten, and it feels like those are pretty true.
Yeah, they're 1-4 in the Big Ten. They're right above Purdue, if that tells you anything. Hey, one good thing is Purdue doesn't lose this week. I know that, but yeah, that it going west to east always seems to be the worst of the two. Going east to west is a little bit different than west to east. But like I think this was a noon kickoff, so that's a 9 o'clock in the morning kickoff. That's hard to do on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And USC's still USC in the aspect of they don't have a great defense. They have a better defense than they did last year, maybe,
Correct.
but they don't have a good defense. And then you add, hey, we just crossed 3 time zones a few days ago. We're still getting used to that. And Maryland's not a dumpster fire. No, they're 1-3 in the Big Ten, but that still they're 4-3. They're not a horrible program. And you've got to go to College Park. That's just it's a recipe that USC really needs to find its identity. I know we're saying that a lot, or I'm saying that a lot, but it's kind of right now they're trying to feel out the new conference and these opponents they've never played or traveled to before, and that's not a good recipe for a team that struggles to finish games. That's their big problem, is they don't know how to finish games right now.
No, I'd say that's completely fair. The one other game I want to point out, but I'm going to be completely transparent with you. I did not watch this one in the midst of everything that was going on this previous Saturday. UCLA beats Rutgers 35-32. That's one where I checked my phone and I'm like, what? Really? Why? UCLA, that's only their second win of the year. They've been pretty rough so far this season. Rutgers had started 4-0, and we were like, oh, look out. Greg Schiano's got him cooking. They're going to a bowl game. Everything's great. They've lost 3 in a row now. UCLA, they've lost to Wisconsin, and they've lost to Nebraska. And I don't know what is going on because, like I said, I didn't get to see this game, but I'm a little bit concerned about what's happening in Piscataway.
Well, there's one positive about tonight's game is there will be a 3-game losing streak that ends because USC's on a 3-game losing streak as well. But let's be completely transparent. We didn't think Rutgers was going to be this juggernaut of anything.
No, but I thought they were a 7-win team.
That's and they honestly they could still
they still
get
could
there,
be. Yes.
But it's a long. I mean, they've still got. They host Minnesota. They could beat USC tonight. They really can.
Yeah.
But they've got Minnesota, Maryland. Then they finish with Illinois at MSU or at Michigan State. So it's not an easy schedule the rest of the way. But they could still win 3 of those final 5.
Yeah. No, and I guess maybe instead of just like blanketing a number like 7 or 8 wins that we had foreseen, I think the biggest thing is heading into the Wisconsin game, it didn't feel like Wisconsin had much momentum and Rutgers was rolling. And so you were thinking, you're thinking, okay, Rutgers should win this one. Rutgers plays UCLA. That's one of the ones you look at the schedule and you say they win, and they didn't get it done. And to your point about travel, I mean, UCLA went coast to coast. They went to Piscataway, and UCLA got that win. So I just, that one was a bit head scratching. And it, like I said, didn't see it. So I don't have observations of what actually transpired from the game. But I just, those are 2 games I kind of expected Rutgers to win, and they've dropped. And I'm starting to wonder what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe Schiano is trying to find that answer. But at the same time, he knows what they've got, and they're just underperforming in certain spots, and these teams are doing a little bit to upset their apple cart, and it's not coming through. Now, they played well against Nebraska. Now, after Nebraska's output last week against IU, maybe you're questioning a little bit about Nebraska, but at the same point, at that time, Rutgers was 4-0.
Yeah.
And they'd just beaten Washington, and Nebraska took care of them. Like they kept them at bay. And it was in Piscataway, which I don't care which venue you're at. Piscataway is Piscataway. It's difficult to play in no matter where you're at. But Nebraska beat them, and you thought, okay, well, this Wisconsin game's going to really gauge it. And something's happened to where they've fallen off. And when you lose to a team like UCLA, and that's not. They're rebuilding completely, and they've got a but for them to drop that game, it really is a head scratcher because what's going on with the Scarlet Knights,
Yeah, no, and that's exactly kind of how I feel. So maybe they bounce back tonight against USC. Again, that's an 11 o'clock kick. I've been loving all the graphics, and jokes on social media of people saying, who's ready for Big Ten football? 11 o'clock kick USC versus Rutgers. That's Big Ten all over it.
That's right.
It is a bit jarring to see. Like when you see that graphic, you're like, it's still taking some time.
And us older people, you look at Rutgers, USC, Big Ten football, and you're like, what? Still doesn't make
that's
sense.
exactly what I mean.
It still doesn't make sense. Even though Rutgers has been there for a few years, you know that it's still just a confusing and kind of almost jarring realization of what the Big Ten is now.
There's this trend on Twitter or X where somebody had posted that their aunt had woken up from a 13-year coma, and everybody's been saying like, "Oh, do this, do this, do this" to show them. And somebody was like, "Tell her this is a Big Ten football game, Rutgers and USC at 11 o'clock." I was like, "That's not a pretty good answer."
Yeah, if there's one of my favorite shows is Scrubs, and there's a guy. There was a scene where a gentleman woke up from a 25-year coma, and he was dressed like Michael Jackson doing the moonwalk and everything. Oh. And it's like, that's almost the same concept. It's like, hello, why don't we show you the Big Ten now?
Yeah. So that'll be fun on the heels again of Game 1 of the World Series, and like I said, selfishly pretty interested in see what the ratings numbers does on this, because I think this is also going to be the highest rated World Series in some time, not ever, but some.
You've got
time.
both of the largest markets in the country. That's going to be a huge draw because of that.
Exactly. And two of the biggest brands and two of the best players. Like, you're seeing the two giants fight.
Right. And I don't know if it comes close to the 2016 World Series when you had every single Cubs fan watching every single game, and a majority of Cleveland fans at that point as well. But at the same time, these are much bigger markets. So you might come close to it.
Well, and this one might be just about the most memorable since then. Like, if you ask, I'm more of a casual baseball observer. If you ask me right now who won the World Series last year, it's going to take me a minute. Like, I actually can't remember. They played some Rangers, right? They played the Diamondbacks. Yeah. Okay. Look at that. Good answer. Good answer. Family Feud style.
I know it's Texas.
Astros won somewhere in there. I don't know. But like, this is one people are going to be like, yes, I remember Yankees Dodgers World Series. It's going to have a memory that doesn't quite fade.
This harkens back to the 70s when the Dodgers and Yankees had some good World Series matchups. I think they played back-to-back years 1 year or 2 years in a row, and there were some pretty good matchups. So,
if I'm not mistaken, the highest rated World Series ever was one of those Yankees Dodgers back in the 70s. Now, granted, and it's funny, I think actually the Dan Levitard show was talking about this earlier this week, and they said there were 3 channels.
Yeah, so or most people had the Farmer 5, as I used to be told that I had, is the 3 major networks, Fox and the All Jesus All the Time channel.
Let's go ahead and move to some of the other games this week. Nebraska and Ohio State are kicking off at noon. Look, I expect Ohio State to win this one. I expect them to win it by a healthy amount. I think the big thing, and see if you agree, Sam, is just to see if Nebraska responds with a competitive effort from what just happened last week.
Yeah, because you know what? This is the least anticipated, most anticipated game that I've had in a really long time. Like, 4 weeks ago, I was like, oh, this is going to be undefeateds. Now you're coming in. Now, granted, undefeateds, I still with the caveat that Ohio State still had to play Oregon. But I thought it could be 2 undefeated teams, and here we come with Nebraska kind of limping in against Ohio State. I anticipate – I don't know that 25.5 is enough. If IU's going to dismantle that Nebraska team by 49, I still think Ohio State's the better team than IU, and it should be every bit as equal to that as IU did to them. Because if I'm Nebraska, I'm really angry at the schedule maker. You put us now. Granted, nobody anticipated, other than those in Bloomington, that IU was going to be this good.
Mm-hmm.
But back-to-back games against top 15 teams on the road, that's rough. That is rough.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I'll be excited to see what happens there. That's noon from the Horseshoe.
Yeah.
Also at noon is where College Game Day is. Number 13 Indiana hosts Washington.
Football kickoff or noon kickoff. Fox noon kickoff is there too.
Yes, yeah, like it, which is it makes sense for them. I was surprised when College Game Day announced they were going to Bloomington because, of course, now Disney doesn't have any partnership with the Big Ten Conference. And that was a again back to sports media talk that maybe not anybody else cares about besides me. But I was curious to see if College Game Day would still do some like Big Ten venues and stuff. And there are some
The
ranked
answer is yes.
games. Yeah, right. And there are some ranked games. So I was like, I don't really see that Washington coming to Indiana is going to do it, but they decided to do it. But this game, I think we already touched on the big story here is how does Indiana keep momentum going without Curtis Rourke, who's been honestly, I don't want to call it managing. He's almost been Tom Bradying the Indiana offense, late
Not
stage
making
Tom Brady.
mistakes.
Yeah, and just like putting players in a position where they can run after the catch, they can show their strengths and just give them the ball in space, let them do their thing.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
because the one knock on him that I had heard for Rourke was, well, he doesn't throw downfield, but he gets all these passing yards because his receivers make move. He's got to put the ball there to give them the opportunity. Now, don't get me wrong, yards after the catch it's on the receiver as well,
Hmm.
and probably more so. But you still should get that credit for you completed the pass. So if it's a 40-yard pass play and you threw it 8 yards downfield, so be it.
Well, and those receivers from talking with Zach Osterman from the Indy Star,
Yeah.
they have said that the big thing about Curtis is the way he throws you open. He throws you into spots that allow you to do stuff after the catch.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, yeah, absolutely. Like, Curtis deserves a lot of credit for what he's doing here because, as the receivers are telling people, he's putting us in positions that allow us to do our thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's look, there's a lot of jobs and responsibilities of quarterback. That's one that might be underappreciated, and
Reading
to
the
hear it
defense
from the
is
receivers.
immensely important. And if he's
Yeah,
able to throw them open, like you just said, that is a good trait for a quarterback that you
yeah,
want.
absolutely. A top 20 battle at Autzen Stadium. The number one Oregon Ducks will be hosting Illinois. This is a 3:30 kick. Oregon's favored by 3 to 4 scores. Um, I kind of see it maybe going that way. I think Oregon's just immensely talented, but I am excited to see because Illinois has been surprising me all season what they have up their sleeve for this one.
I think you take Oregon in the points, or not Oregon in the points, Illinois in the points. Take the points because I think
Okay.
Oregon's going to play. They've shown right now that they can play. They can beat anybody. We know that much. I don't think Oregon loses this game, but I think Illinois plays it closer because they're not a horrible team. I mean, look at what Boise State. I don't know that Illinois is better than Boise State, but Boise State had Oregon on the ropes. Now,
Yep.
granted, they're more polished now because that was game 2 of the season, and Dylan Gabriel was still getting used to the the whole offense and the system. They're going to be better, but Illinois has just shown that they're playing great football and they're going to play with who they're against. And do I think it could be a 2-score win? Yeah, I think that, but I honestly think Illinois is going to keep it within that 3-score spread.
Yeah. And I'll be really excited to see how the trenches kind of fare in
Yeah,
this one because Oregon's defensive line has been immensely impressive to me. I think it's one of the better ones in college football.
agreed.
Um, to see if Illinois is able to contain or handle all of that pressure that Oregon brings up front, I'm really interested to see how that plays out. But like we said, that's a 3:30 kick from Eugene. Iowa Northwestern. Northwestern's taken some lumps at this point in the season. Iowa looking to bounce back from what was, again, kind of a disappointing effort in East Lansing, I suppose you could say. The offense just still showing some of those old sores.
Yeah.
But this is an opportunity for the Hawkeyes to bounce back, and I think they will.
I agree. Even though they gave up, excuse me, 32 to Michigan State, that defense is still a really good defense. They have their games where they can really buckle down. I think Iowa recovers a little bit, even with their quote unquote inept offense at times. That's being
I think
kind.
it's fair. Yeah. And we're all about kindness. We're sharing kindness here at
That's
Big
right.
Talk.
That's right.
Maryland goes to Minnesota. Again, Maryland picks up a nice win over USC this previous week. Now at Minnesota, the Gophers are favored, but it's a close line. I think it's 4.5 points.
Yep.
This is a 3:30 kick as well. Uh, Honestly, both of these teams are 4-3, Sam, and one of them is going to move to 5 wins and be that much closer to a bowl game. The other is going to drop to 4-4, and depending on the remaining schedule for which team, like you're in a position where you may not be
Right.
bowl eligible. So this is a pretty important game for both of these squads.
I like Minnesota, the way Minnesota's performed this year. I mean, they had Michigan. They, whatever your thoughts are on that onside kick, they still would have had to drive down and get in position to kick a winning field goal. And we all know that their kicker is capable of missing a makeable kick. That's not piling on him, but against North Carolina, the whole fireworks going off on the miss. He can
Still the
be.
most unbelievable thing of the season behind Kurt Signetti turning
That's
around.
got to be one of those. He's got his finger on the button and he didn't wait to see the refs. He just and shot him off. That's good. No, it's no good.
Or I imagine him shaking from the pressure and then it just accidentally touches.
Or he dumped his coffee on it and then just set it off right away. Whatever. But I don't. Minnesota is better than what I anticipated them being this year, and
agreed.
And they're performing better than I thought they would. And Maryland has to travel to them, so it's Huntington Bank Stadium is very favorable for the Gophers, and I think that may be what it is that helps propel them.
Well, and for Minnesota, I mean, to your point, imagine if they make the field goal against North Carolina. Imagine if they do win that game against Michigan, which they had the opportunity. 6-1, like
and
it's a
ranked.
whole different story.
You they're ranked.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of wild.
They're literally 2 plays away, two plays and a short drive away from being 6-1.
It's just wild. Now, and let's take a look at those remaining schedules, like we talked about from Maryland. Next, they go to number 1 Oregon.
Rough one.
Then they host Rutgers. They host Iowa. Then they're at Penn State. So to the point of bowl eligibility, like this is a big win game for Maryland. Minnesota's remaining schedule isn't as treacherous. They have at Illinois, which isn't easy. Then they go to Rutgers, they host Penn State, and they go to Wisconsin. I suppose it's just less treacherous because both of them share Penn State, but you swap Oregon and Illinois. Not that Illinois is a good game to have, but
right. But Minnesota, excuse me, we're talking Maryland, aren't we? Or are we talking? No,
I went to both.
You did. Minnesota's got Illinois, and they've shown that they can play against decent. Michigan's not a dumpster fire, and at that point they were still in the mid, low teens ranked when they played them, or 21st or something. So it is very possible that Minnesota hangs with them. And did you say they host Illinois or they go to Illinois?
I actually can't remember. Hang on, let me pull that back up. I think they go to Illinois. Yes, they go to Illinois.
Which that makes it
Minnesota
a lot harder.
Yep.
But it's still possible that they could pull out something against the Illini. I don't anticipate it, but this is really a must-win for both of them, just to make it a lot easier track to getting to a bowl game.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Also, Penn State goes to Wisconsin. That's a 7:30 kick. Penn State, number 3 in the country, only favored by 6.5 points in this one. As they go to Madison, Wisconsin. I think some of it's from what Wisconsin's done here recently. Wisconsin's sneakily 5-2 here on the season. This could spell for an upset,
especially since it's at Camp Randall. Camp Randall's raucous. Like they and we talk about these venues being a big advantage. That's not at all a downplaying or being cliche. they are very tough to go. The Big Ten is very tough, and I'm not saying they're the only conference that it's tough to go on the road, but there are a lot of situations that teams go into that they're not ready for when they play on the road against that team.
Right. No, I completely agree. So that'll be a good one. That's a nightcap, as well as Michigan State and Michigan. The battle for the Paul Bunyan Trophy, 7:30 kick from Ann Arbor. It's Michigan State's fifth straight night game, which is a new record. But 7:30 kick between these two. Look, I think a lot of people understand the history and the tension that exists within the state between these two schools.
Yeah.
This is a big one, and for both of these programs, it's an interesting new chapter because you have two new head coaches to this rivalry
First time
with
ever.
Sharon Moore at Michigan, yeah, and not first time ever, but
Well, in a long time. I'm sorry.
yes, because I believe
Yes.
Nick Saban and
Yes,
Lloyd
Nick
Carr,
Saban and Lloyd Carr were together. So first time.
yeah,
That's what I meant. First time in a long time, not first time ever. Sorry.
we got it fixed, all good.
It's morning. Come on, give me a
And then,
break.
and then Jonathan Smith on the Michigan State side. I think there's some interest in that spells into it, but honestly, you don't really have to try and search for storylines. Like it's just a real bitterness. It's real emotional. It's real passionate, and it's going to be real interesting come Saturday night because these two teams just don't like each other.
Well, and that's the interesting thing to me because I marked this as a very losable game for Michigan. Not, and that was before any games had been played. You always worry about the rivalry games anyways, but when you're kind
Mhm.
of sliding down a little bit from what you have been and the other team's kind of rising at the same time, you run into a little bit of a wow, that could be a trap game in the aspect of Michigan could be coming out of this 4-4.
Mhm.
Very easily come out of this 4-4. And I wouldn't be surprised and I wouldn't be shocked if that happens. It just there are I didn't anticipate them losing to Washington. That's one thing, but I also didn't anticipate Washington being as good as they are.
So let me. I suppose we'll just pin it down. Do you have a pick for this one?
Um, with the way each game that they're coming off of, I think Michigan's I would take Michigan State. I really
Michigan State.
do feel that Michigan State's coming off of a very good performance. As long as they're not going, oh hey, we've got everything fixed. Keep that level-headedness of look, we still got work to do. This is still Michigan. It doesn't matter that they're 4-3. This is still Michigan and a rivalry game. They still look at us as little brother. Let's go
Oh,
whoop their butts.
I was gonna say. I can promise you, Michigan State never takes this one for granted.
And
Never,
you
ever.
think you absolutely think that, but you're not in those kids' heads in their dorms or their apartments sitting there thinking, yeah, we got it figured out.
That's
But
fair, but I could tell you in 20 some years of this rivalry, it's never happened.
right,
Yeah,
right.
honestly, it's been the other side, and that's what's kind of made this rivalry so interesting. The years where Michigan State's been discounted or disregarded,
Yeah.
and they beat Michigan anyway. And like it's yeah, it's a big deal here in mid Michigan. But I'm kind of with you. Honestly, this comes down to me as look, if you look at Michigan State's losses, two of them were Oregon and Ohio State, right? And
Anticipated and expected.
Oregon and Ohio State are the most two talented teams in the Big Ten and two of the most in the country. And
Correct.
Michigan
Yep.
State's rebuilding, not necessarily on the same talent plane as that. Like that's
Right.
kind of fair. Boston College lost that one at night. It was a close game. Had a lot of players injured. Had the stud Nick Marsh receiver was out of that game, and a lot of self-inflicted things. There's a lot of turnovers, interceptions, penalties. Some of that is starting to be cleaned up a little bit. And I think you're starting to see a little bit of what Michigan State can be, what they're capable of being when they get rid of the self-inflicted things. Like there's enough talent there to go win ball games, to go win this ball game. The only question in my mind is, does Michigan State get in its own way? And that's what it's going to have to be really cautious of, especially in a rivalry game where tempers flare and emotions are high to begin with.
Well, and we've seen it in the past that bubbles up. You see all the what is it? Miami, Florida State, Florida State, all these Michigan, Ohio State. Michigan State is, you could have some pre-game festivities going on. That's a real thing that's happened in the past, and it definitely could. And that just means there's a real dislike. I'll be generous here. Dislike.
I've been trying to be very delicate around it too, but honestly, like, if it's one of the more bitter, passionate, in-state football rivalries you're going to find in the country. I don't know if everybody understands the magnitude of how real this rivalry is, but it's certainly one that's always circled, and excited to get this one kicked off tomorrow night, Michigan State and Michigan. All right, real quick before we close the door, Sam, since we started the show with a little bit of baseball talk, let's end it with baseball talk.
Okay.
One word, Yankees, Dodgers, who wins the series?
Can they both lose?
That was more than one word.
Rizzo.
All right. Sam, the Yankees fan. Appreciate you. Let's go ahead.
No, I've got some special words for you off air there.
Let's wrap up this week's edition of Big Talk. Sam, where can everybody find us?
All right. On the TikToks, Instagrams, and the platform formerly known as Twitter, we are at B1G_talk. That's B1G Dalton, not B-I, B1G _talk. Go to B1G Talk on Facebook, and just Big Talk, not all Big Talk. We are Big Talk. Then every week on ASAP Network, as well as the Lounge Media Group Facebook stream. Later that day, we will be released through the Lounge Media Group Productions. Quick side note on that is, soon it will be on the we will stream on the Lounge Sports Network page once the page gets old enough.
Very nice.
There are stipulations behind stuff, but if you want to watch the stream after we've gone live, you can feel free to go to Spotify and find our stream there.
All right. Well, very good. That'll do it for another episode of Big Talk, college sports with a Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. Want to thank you all so much for tuning in and joining us here this morning, or if you're listening to us later in the afternoon. Have a great weekend. Enjoy your 11 o'clock kick. Get the coffee in. Rutgers, USC. Let's go, baby.
Purdue won't lose this week. All right, Mr. Manzers. You got a busy